Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland. Welcome back to Fallout New Vegas, everybody, where today we're going to be taking a look at the grenade launcher for a second time because I wasn't recording my audio for this. So the grenade launcher is one of the weapons that uses the 40mm grenade, which is probably the most common grenade that you're going to find throughout the Wasteland. And it is a big old pump action China Lake style grenade launcher. It's a really cool looking design and it's a really fun weapon to be using. These weapons are fairly rare. You're not going to find grenade launchers super early on unless you want to run up to the boomers. The boomers do actually have quite a few of these you could steal, so that can be useful, and they also have ammo for it, which is also pretty useful. Aside from that, there's one down in Vault 34 too, so you can run down there and get that, assuming that you can fight your way through the ghouls, because there's usually a lot of ghouls and that place is kind of scary. The grenade launcher requires 75 explosives and 5 strength to wield, which is pretty reasonable by the time you're going to be getting these. 5 strength isn't super high, and explosives builds might want to have more than that, just so they can carry around more explosives and more explosive weapons because they tend to be pretty heavy. This one does 30 damage on hit with a grenade, so if you hit something directly, you do even more damage, and then it does 100 explosive damage. So you can do even more if you hit something and then it explodes. But you don't always need to do that, you just need to get close with the grenade launcher. That's kind of the thing with all the explosive weapons, you just gotta get close to them, and then they'll do the work for you. This one does 72 damage per second. That's fine. Damage per second is a little bit weird for explosives anyway, because you could also hit multiple enemies and have even more DPS. So damage per second, I would argue, doesn't matter too much a lot of the time. This one has a big old 0 for its crit damage, just like most explosives, so hitting crits does not matter. This has a 1x crit modifier, so that doesn't matter when you can't hit any damage for crits. This also goes for sneak crits too. Usually they would deal double damage, but if your double damage is 0, it's still going to be 0. This one costs 35 action points to use in VATS, which isn't too high for an explosives weapon like this. Most explosive weapons cost a lot. You don't always want to be using VATS for an explosives weapon though, because if you lob this at an enemy and then you have like a slow timed event where it tries to switch to another enemy, they might actually be close enough to you to where you will end up blowing yourself up. So you might just want to use this one shot at a time in VATS if you're going to be doing that, otherwise it can get a little bit awkward. This has a 1 spread on it, which spread doesn't matter too much for an explosives weapon either, because you're just trying to hit close enough to an enemy. You don't need to hit them directly, but if you do, you get extra damage. This one has 4 magazine size, so you can load 4 grenades into this, which is pretty cool, and it actually has a fairly fast reload, even though its rate of fire is fairly slow. There's not really a great way to speed up its rate of fire. It's always kind of a slow pump action to be firing this anyway. This one weighs 12. It is a very heavy weapon. It can actually be cut down in half if you take the heavyweight perk. Then it goes down to 6, and that's the same as a regular grenade rifle, and that is a lot more manageable, but 12 can be a little bit heavy. And then this one has 100 item health, which might sound kind of low, and it would be for other weapons. It certainly would for a full auto weapon. But since this weapon is so slow shooting, you might not be firing a whole lot of shots through your grenade launcher, because you often don't need a whole lot of shots fired through the grenade launcher, especially if you're going with a kind of general purpose build or you're going with a mixed build, to where you might just fire this at an enemy, break their limbs, and then switch over to whatever other weapon you want to be using. Let's say like All-American, and then you can spam them down with that. For the pros of the grenade launcher, this one does do really high damage, which is nice. It has a fast reload, which is also pretty good. Even though its rate of fire isn't super high, at least you're not going to be running out of shots. This one also has AoE damage, which is fantastic for initiating a fight or ending a fight. And that's going to be the main use for explosives a lot of the time, because once enemies start running up on top of you, it's really awkward to be using explosives, since you have to lob them far enough away to actually not hurt you, but close enough to the enemy that they still get hurt. It's also really easy for enemies to inadvertently run up and body block you when you're trying to fire an explosive weapon and you blow yourself up too. But the cons of this, it does have a slow rate of fire. You can't do follow-up shots super fast. Maybe if you arc them, one in the air and then another one kind of going, then you can usually get like 2 grenades on a target, which is kind of nice. But it's not going to be super fast follow-up shots, one after another, like other weapons can. These are fairly rare as well, so it might be difficult repairing these unless you have jury rigging or weapon repair kits, or you are willing to pay somebody to fix them up for you, and they might be kind of expensive. And the self-damage is always a problem with explosive weapons, because it is really easy to blow yourself up with explosives, especially if you're indoors or you're fighting enemies at kind of close range. You want to be using this at medium range as much as possible, because longer range, it can be a little bit awkward to actually get the angle to fire them down on top of something. Medium range is probably the best, since at least if the ground is level. If you're sitting up high, then long range is actually pretty good because you can lob them in really easy. If it's flat ground though, usually you want to be them at like medium range so you can actually hit the enemies effectively and not blow yourself up. Speaking of explosives, this one does have a couple different types of explosives you can load into it. It has the standard 40mm grenades, which do everything that you would kind of want them to. You fire them out, they cause a big explosion, they do standard damage. This is probably going to be the most common grenade that you're going to be running through it. It's also the most common that vendors are probably going to have. You could also load this with incendiary grenades. These do a little bit less damage on the initial explosion, but they deal damage over time. They also kind of mark enemies because they're on fire then, so you can see them a little bit easier if they're running around. Then you've got the plasma grenades. These ones get you a little bit more damage and function just like regular plasma grenades that you would normally throw, to where they have a bit of a different explosion. They have the green color to them, and they are honestly usually an upgrade over the regular 40mm grenades, and in terms of damage if you're going with a full explosives build. But if you're just going for like crippling limbs, then you may not want to invest in these over the regular 40mm because they are more expensive and they are more rare to find. And then you also have the pulse grenades. Pulse grenades work the same way as the thrown pulse grenades, where they will nerf your damage per shot by quite a bit. It's by like 30%. But they do make it so that whenever you hit a robot or somebody in power armor, then it deals additional damage to them. So this can be really good if you want to run a bunch of these to Old World Blues and you just want to be fighting the robots there. That's probably the best place to fight robots. Outside of that, you could potentially use it against like the Securitrons on the strip, and against the Brotherhood, I guess, because they have power armor. For rating on my tier list for the grenade launcher, I'd put this one into B tier. Main reason why is I don't necessarily think the grenade launcher is better than the grenade rifle a lot of the time. The grenade rifle kind of does the same job, but it weighs less by default, and you can get them a lot easier. You can get them a lot earlier on too. So that kind of helps. It also has an upgrade to it where you can fire the grenades even further than something like the grenade launcher, so that makes them a little bit better too, at least if you want to be using this at long range. Both these weapons are affected by the perk Heave Ho, which usually just makes it so you can throw melee and just thrown weapons 50% further. This also works for explosive weapons that lob stuff though, so like the grenade rifles count for this and the grenade launcher counts for it. There's also some other perks that we should probably talk about too with the grenade launcher. Hit the deck helps a lot too. Makes it so you take reduced damage from explosives. This includes your own, so you don't blow yourself up as much. Splash damage can be a pro and a con because it makes it so you have a bigger explosion radius with your explosives, but that makes it easier to hurt yourself. It also makes it easier to hit enemies, so outdoors it's really good. Indoors it's pretty bad. You might want to or might not want to take splash damage depending on how you enjoy using your explosives. And then Demo Expert is also another really good one, giving you 20% more damage per rank of this. So you can go all the way up to 60% more damage with all of your explosive weapons, which is pretty good. So in conclusion, would I recommend the grenade launcher? Sure, the grenade launcher is super fun. I may not recommend it over a grenade rifle though, so if you like the grenade rifle, you might not want to be using this, or you could use both. Do whatever you want. They're both pretty good. They're very nice for initiating a fight or ending a fight because something's running away. It's really easy to hit it with a grenade, and if enemies don't know that you're there, it's also pretty easy to hit them with a grenade. If you're not going with an explosives build, they can still be super fun to use. So if you have ammo and you find one, you could use it for a little bit, but then maybe ditch it later because they are rather heavy, especially with all the grenades, and if you're playing on the hardcore difficulty. So may not be the best thing for you to take. Again, a grenade rifle I think kind of outcompetes this, but it's still a pretty decent weapon. Tell me your thoughts on the grenade launcher down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye bye everybody.